On the morning of September 1st, 1859, a telegraph operator in Washington, D.C. touched his instrument and got a shock that threw him across the room. The wires were live, but no one had turned them on. In Pittsburgh, the paper used to record messages began to smolder. In Boston, operators disconnected their batteries entirely and found the system still worked, powered by nothing anyone could explain. Outside, the sky was on fire. People in Cuba looked up and saw auroras, the shimmering curtains of light that only appear near the poles, blazing red and green above the tropics at midnight. Workers in the Rocky Mountains woke up thinking it was dawn. It was 2 in the morning. A shepherd in Queensland, Australia, reported he could read a newspaper by the light in the sky. This wasn't a natural disaster. It wasn't a weapon. It was the sun. And it had just done something that the entire infrastructure of modern civilization is not designed to survive. His name was Richard Carrington, and on the morning of September 1st, he was doing what he did most mornings, sketching sunspots from a small observatory attached to his estate south of London. He had been tracking the sun for years, a meticulous record of every dark blemish and active region on the solar surface. At 11:18 that morning, he saw something he had never seen before. A brilliant white light erupted from the sunspot cluster he was watching, so intense he assumed a beam of sunlight had broken through a gap in his equipment. He checked. The equipment was fine. He called for a witness. By the time his colleague arrived, the light had already faded. The whole event lasted less than 5 minutes. Carrington wrote up his observation and published it, noting carefully that he did not wish to be seen as suggesting a causal connection between what he had seen on the solar surface and the auroral displays reported that night. He was being scientifically cautious. He was also right about everything. To understand what Carrington saw, you have to understand what the sun actually is. It is not a stable burning object. It is a seething magnetic engine. 400,000 miles of electrically charged plasma held together by gravity and riven with field lines that twist, tangle, and occasionally snap. When a section of the solar magnetic field becomes wound too tightly, it can destabilize and release its energy in a single violent discharge. This is a solar flare. The flare Carrington observed was the largest ever recorded. It released energy equivalent to roughly 10 billion atomic bombs in a matter of minutes. But the flare itself was not the main event. The main event came with the flare, a coronal mass ejection, a billion-ton cloud of magnetized plasma launched off the solar surface at 4 million miles per hour. Normally, these clouds take 3 to 4 days to reach Earth. This one arrived in 17 hours and 40 minutes, the fastest transit time ever recorded. When it hit everything. Earth's magnetosphere is the planet's natural shield. It deflects the solar wind continuously, particles and radiation streaming out from the sun at all times. Under normal conditions, this works. Auroras form at the poles where the magnetic field funnels particles in, but the shield holds. The Carrington event overloaded the shield entirely. The magnetosphere was compressed inward to the point where geostationary orbit, the altitude where modern communications satellites operate, was inside the disturbed zone. Scientists who have since modeled the event estimate it was 10 to 20 times more powerful than any solar storm recorded in the modern era. The DST index, the standard measure of magnetic storm intensity, would have registered somewhere between -1,000 and -2,000 nanoteslas. The worst storm since systematic measurement began in 1957 registered -589. Carrington was in a different category. It wasn't a large storm. It was a different phenomenon. If this is making your head spin, you're in exactly the right place. Subscribe to Midnight Fact Society. We put out stories like this every week. And drop a comment below. What unsolved mystery or impossible fact do you want us to cover next? Every idea is welcome. The telegraph system of 1859 was the most technologically sophisticated communications infrastructure on Earth. It spanned continents. It was the internet of its time. And the Carrington event destroyed it in hours. Some operators received shocks severe enough to cause burns. Fires broke out in telegraph offices across North America and Europe. One operator in Washington reported that he and his colleague took turns working the line because the shocks were too painful to sustain continuously. What he didn't realize, what none of them fully grasped, was that the storm had effectively turned the telegraph wire network into a single vast antenna, and the fluctuating magnetic field was acting as a generator. The current in the lines had nothing to do with the batteries. It was being induced directly by the Earth's changing magnetic field. The storm was powering the wires itself. Now consider that in 2025, the infrastructure that runs human civilization is not telegraph wire. It is something far more complex, far more interdependent, and far more vulnerable. A 2009 report by the National Academy of Sciences laid out what a Carrington-scale event would do to the modern world. High-voltage transformers, the large units that step up electricity for long-distance transmission, would be the first to fail. There are roughly 2,000 of these units in the United States alone. They weigh up to 300 tons. They cannot be quickly replaced. Most have no spares. Manufacturing lead time runs from 1 to 3 years. The report estimated that a Carrington-level storm would knock out power across most of North America, Europe, and parts of Asia within roughly 72 hours. Without power, water treatment fails, fuel pumps fail, hospital backup generators, designed for days not months, run dry. GPS, which runs on satellites in the zone that the Carrington event compressed to ground level, would stop functioning. The internet, dependent on powered nodes, would fragment. Communication satellites would be damaged or rendered inoperative. The total cost in the first year alone was estimated at up to $2 trillion. Recovery time was projected at 4 to 10 years. 4 to 10 years to rebuild what we built over a century, assuming the knowledge and supply chains required to rebuild it still function in the absence of the grid. The 2012 near miss is not widely known. On July 23rd of that year, a coronal mass ejection left the sun that scientists have since characterized as potentially Carrington scale. It was aimed almost directly at Earth. It missed by 9 days. 9 days earlier in the solar rotation, and it would have been a direct hit. A 2014 analysis by physicist Pete Riley, published in the journal Space Weather, calculated the probability of a Carrington-class event hitting Earth in any given decade at approximately 12%. That number has not gone down. The sun is currently in solar cycle 25, which reached its predicted peak in 2025. The cycle is running stronger than forecast. We are inside the window of maximum solar activity right now. Here is what the Carrington event asks of you, if you're willing to follow the question where it leads. We have built a civilization on the assumption that the electromagnetic environment of Earth will remain stable. Every system we depend on, every transaction, every navigation signal, every medical device, every communication, assumes the magnetosphere holds, and it will hold most of the time. The sun has fired events like this before and will fire them again. The 774 AD carbon-14 anomaly, recorded in tree rings worldwide, suggests a solar event perhaps 20 times larger than Carrington struck the planet 1,200 years ago. Life continued because in 774, there was nothing to destroy. We have since built something very large